Chapter 9. The Authority of the King. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Matthew 28:18. And they said to him, By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority to do these things? Mark 11, verse 28. Authority is a much misunderstood subject. Its nature, source, and application are commonly misapprehended. The dictionaries and lexicons tend to include in their definitions of the word the idea of power. Footnote: Authority: the power to determine, adjudicate, or otherwise settle issues or disputes. Jurisdiction: the right to control, command, or determine. A power or right delegated or given. Authorization. Taken from dictionary.com. And taken from dictionary.cambridge.org, authority is the official power to make decisions for other people or to tell them what they must do. Official permission or the legal right to do something. End of footnote. This is also the word that the King James Version of the Bible often used to translate the Greek word exousia, which in more modern versions is typically translated as authority. The use of the English word power in the definition of this word can be misleading. The older translation of Matthew 28:18 reads, All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. While not wishing to detract from the actual dynamic power of God exhibited by Christ's miracles and such, the actual meaning of the statement has more to do with royal authority. The word power may refer to the faculty of sheer strength, force, or capability. Thus, the difference between the power of God and that of any other entity or force would be greater than that between a draft horse and a butterfly. Power is a physically and visibly demonstrable quality of which differences between parties can be objectively quantified, as in weightlifting competitions. However, a stronger man does not necessarily possess a superior authority. The loser in the weightlifting contest may be the CEO of a corporation, while the champion may be his janitor. In terms of the hierarchy of the company, the man with less physical power actually has greater authority. The strength of the draft horse is thousands of times greater than that of the butterfly, but the former possesses no more authority than does the latter. Therefore, authority is not the same thing as power, as we usually think of it, though in the conventions of language the terms have sometimes been used interchangeably. While power may be viewed as brute strength, authority is a less tangible quality. It cannot be physically observed or measured. It is a principle rather than a power. Authority speaks of the ethical or legal right to make the call, to settle all disputes with a word, to rule or to have one's way. The man possessing greater power, seen as strength, may have the ability to subdue weaker opponents, but the one in authority has the actual right to do so, whether possessing superior physical power or not. Even the bodybuilding champion does not have the strength to stop a line of oncoming traffic with one hand, but the traffic cop has authority to do so, even if he is a 98-pound weakling. Authority is an ethical prerogative, not a physical capability. It is the right of the petite mother to be obeyed by her adolescent son who is a foot taller and has the strength to lift her over his head. It is the authority of a football coach in a wheelchair to command athletes twice his weight concerning what they will be doing on the field. It is the prerogative of a frail, elderly judge, crippled with arthritis, to dictate the fate of a strong, fierce, and dangerous criminal. A recognized president, as commander-in-chief, commands armies powerful enough to overthrow him, and they must obey him. That is the first point we need to grasp. The nature of authority. Power is demonstrable, but authority has to be assumed or accepted by faith to exist. We obey the man with a badge when he is directing traffic, not because he has the strength to halt our vehicle if we chose to run him down, but because we assume he possesses authorization from a more powerful agency, and that he is no impostor. The true story of Frank Abagnale, depicted in the movie Catch Me If You Can, proves how one may convincingly claim to have an authority that does not really exist. Abagnale, beginning at age 18, was able to pull off a number of scams, successfully impersonating an airline captain, a doctor in a hospital, and an attorney, all activities for which he had no training, right, or authorization. The assumption of authority by one who takes charge may be in line with reality or not. That is, a man may give an order as if people are obligated to obey him, when he may in fact possess no real authority at all. Imposters sometimes telephone our homes, claiming to be from the IRS or some other government agency, and demanding that we send them information about our private finances. This is a common scam, and most of us hopefully do not fall for it. In such cases, we obviously have every right to ignore the pretender's authority to give us commands. There are two kinds of legitimate authority for us to understand. 1. Inherent or natural authority is a concept almost universally understood and acknowledged. For example, a patent is given to an inventor or a copyright to an author, in recognition of the creative person's right to control his or her product. The natural rights of parents to govern their children would be another commonly recognized example. Recognition of such rights assumes that one ethically possesses authority over what he or she has brought into existence. We know this intuitively, especially when we ourselves are the creators. Such is the authority that God possesses over all the cosmos and all people, due to his having created all things. This is the proper understanding of the word sovereignty. A sovereign is a king or master who has all authority to act unchallenged within his own domain. God's sovereignty is absolute, due to his being the author, inventor, and father of everything that exists. 2. A second kind of authority is that which is delegated, which we call authorization, residing in one who has been commissioned to exercise the prerogatives of one who holds a higher position in the hierarchy. The centurion who commanded 100 soldiers understood that his authority over them was granted by one above himself, in his case, a tribune. He recognized that Jesus had also received delegated authority under God and could authoritatively give commands such as normally only God could give. Such was the command for a sick man to be supernaturally healed from a distance by a word. The Roman officer expressed this conviction thus: "Only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this one, Go, and he goes, and to another, Come, and he comes, and to my servant, Do this, and he does it." The 100 men whom the centurion commanded obeyed him because they believed him to be subject himself to higher authority. Submission to the centurion was tantamount to submission to the highest authority in the unbroken chain of command, in which this officer was a mere link, that is, to Caesar. While the power of Christ's miracles could be seen by all, the centurion did not mention Christ's healing power per se, but expressed faith in his delegated authority to command whatever God willed to be done. Jesus was frankly astonished to find such faith in a Gentile man, and exclaimed, "I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel." What the centurion possessed, and Israel lacked, was the faith or confidence that Jesus as the Messiah was second only to God in the cosmic chain of command. This is why most of the Jews did not follow him. They tended to disregard his authority. Obedience is the ethically required response to legitimate authority. Even though Jesus exercised great supernatural power, there was the separate question of his authority to do what he did. For example, in driving money changers out of the temple. Jesus did not do this by a show of physical strength, nor by the manifestation of miraculous power. He was able to do so by claiming that he had the right to do so, because it was his Father's house, and by the money changers cowering to his implied moral authority. Knowing that Jesus is God in flesh, we might imagine that he possessed inherent and natural authority by dint of his deity. However, in becoming a man, Jesus placed himself under the same authority that all men are required to honor. He emptied himself of divine privileges and took on the form of a servant. Therefore God has also highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name. That is, God gave him supreme authority. In such contexts, as we shall see in the next chapter, name often functions as a synonym for authority. While on earth, Jesus repeatedly affirmed that he had a derived authority delegated to him from God. Recognizing actual authority. Authority is not only an ethical principle, but also an intellectual one. We refer to intellectual authority as expertise. Everyone who claims to know something about any subject is inherently claiming to possess a degree of expertise. They are professing to speak with a measure of authority on the subject. Since people often disagree on a topic under discussion, and one cannot believe everyone, the question must be asked, whose authority is to be trusted? That is, whose opinions should we believe on the subject? Because people are prone to speak with confidence on subjects they know little about, it is not always immediately obvious who can really speak authoritatively. We naturally yield our trust to the persons who impress us as seeming to know the most about a subject. If my car is making a strange rumbling sound in the front end, a neighbor might assure me that I only need a bit more air in my tires. Another neighbor may disagree, insisting that I need to replace an upper control arm bushing, whatever that may be. The second man actually sounds more authoritative, partly because he uses technical words which intimidate me by his apparent expertise. On the other hand, I might tend to favor the first man's opinion because it suggests a much less expensive solution to my mysterious problem. Neither of these reasons is a good one for putting my faith in the opinion of one man over the other. One man may actually be an auto mechanic with 30 years' experience working on my model of car. The other man might not know a wrench from a caliper. If so, then I will be inclined to trust the authority or expertise of the more experienced man, even if he is recommending the more expensive repair. We recognize the authority of one person over another frequently in ordinary life. Whether we are consulting doctors about unexplained abdominal pain, seeking legal advice from a competent attorney, or comparing the time displayed on our digital alarm clocks with that on our cell phones. The authority of expertise is that of its conformity to reality, or the truth. Truth possesses its own intrinsic authority, because all reality by definition conforms to it. We may ignore or reject the authority of the truth, but we do so at our own risk, since reality always wins in the end. To ask whether there is or is not a God is an inquiry into the truth of the matter. One answer will conform to reality, and a contrary one will not. In the process of weighing the opinions of alternative authorities on this, as with any other question, one needs to ask, which of the many voices making statements about God actually speaks with expertise on the topic? Who possesses the truth of the matter? In such an inquiry, one might be inclined to believe the views of one of the world's greatest biologists. The question of God's existence lies entirely outside his field of expertise, since God is not part of the observable biosphere, the only realm in which the biologist possesses more expertise than does any layman. His expertise in a field unrelated to our query might cause us to impute a broader authority to him than his actual level of expertise would warrant. Suppose our choice is between the opinion of a biologist who exhibits a glaring chip on his shoulder against all religious ideas, on one hand, and the pronouncements of one who fulfilled numerous ancient prophecies, worked godlike miracles, and personally arose from the dead, on the other. The choice would appear to be an easy one for rational inquirers. Everything we believe on any subject is accepted on the basis of some perceived authority, either that of experts, parents, teachers, news outlets, eyewitnesses, or our own reasoning and subjective impressions. Of course, if the greatest expert of all, God, has spoken, his declarations on any subject would obviously provide the most rational basis for adopting any particular belief. His authority is supreme, and unlike all other contenders, his character renders him incapable of lying. Titus chapter 1, verse 2. If God has delegated all authority in heaven and earth to someone, that person would be the one to listen to and to obey. The sovereign authority of God. God is often referred to as sovereign because, as the creator of all things, he has legitimate natural authority over everything. This idea of sovereign authority does not in itself imply any particular policy of governance. When we say that God is sovereign, some have mistaken this claim to require his meticulous providence or his micromanagement of the universe. On this view, God's sovereignty demands that he must also dictate or decree all things that occur, including what we perceive as the free choices, even the bad ones, of humans and angels. If this is so, then the perceived phenomenon of our free choice is merely an illusion. All choices have their origins in the mastermind's invisible manipulation of every piece on the chessboard. To suggest that the sovereign is required to micromanage his realm is an absurdity. The very meaning of sovereignty means that one who possesses it cannot be required to do anything at all. A sovereign king may be a tyrant seeking to dictate every action of his subjects, or he can choose a less intrusive policy, allowing his subjects a measure of freedom of movement and of choice. Sovereignty speaks of one's right or authority to rule, whereas micromanagement is merely one among many alternative governing styles, which may or may not be chosen by the one who possesses such sovereign rights. While the Bible provides no unique definition of the word sovereignty when the term applies to God, as opposed to earthly sovereigns, it continually communicates the fact of God's authority over his creation using human analogies, like that of a king over his subjects, or a lord over his servants, or a father over his children. These analogies do not necessarily encourage one to conclude that God dictates every thought or action of those under his authority, since humans in analogous roles do not necessarily determine every action of those subordinate to them. We may safely assume that such metaphors of governance are chosen deliberately to tell us something about God by way of comparison to familiar analogies.